go. So once again, my name is Mike Montague. I'm Global Head of Content at Sandler, and I'll be your host for today. Our presenter is Jody Williamson. He's author of The Contrarian Salesperson, a longtime Sandler trainer in Chicago, and a David H. Sandler Award winner. We're talking about 2021 virtual selling trends. We've done a few of these sessions already this year. So if you didn't catch our previous ones, you might want to go back and check out Virtual Presentation Skills with Mark McGraw. That one is available on demand at Sandler.com as well. We talked with Vidyard about how to use video in selling. We're going to touch a little bit on that today, but there's more in-depth tutorials and examples if you go back and catch some of those. And then back when COVID started, we started some remote selling and remote managing video webinars that are also available on demand, as well as other great topics on social selling and LinkedIn, stuff like that. So this is a culmination of our virtual selling series. Jody even presented at our virtual summit some of his best practices just a couple of months ago, but we wanted to circle back because there's so much and it changes so often that we keep coming up with cool new tips and tricks that we can slide in here. Jody, I can let you start sharing your screen, but also introduce yourself. Any other opening thoughts?
Yeah, out of Chicago, and just a quick GPS check in the chat, just so I know where folks are from. It's always interesting to know. So GPS check, where are you sitting today? And who's sitting in the most exotic place? Springfield, Missouri, I would say. Question. Denver, Wheeling. Wow, they're going by fast.
I don't know if Springfield is the most exotic. I'm coming from Kansas City, but we do have some exotic ones in there. I saw India.
So Kalamazoo, I have a good friend in Three Rivers. That's close to there, right? I think so.
That's good. Mexico, Brazil. There we go. Manchester, Hungary. Nice. That might win furthest away. Manila. That's a ways.
Northbrook. There we go. So I'm in Northbrook, so Chicago suburb, and 25 years anniversary coming up in Sandler. So the background on today's talk is, and our topic for today is at the virtual summit. I had 30 minutes that we had allocated for the topic that we're going to elaborate on today. But by the time we got started, Mike, and we got things rolling, it was like 20 minutes. And we said, you know what, it'd be nice to have an expanded version of the topic where instead of the summit where it's we're in just a different environment, for a webinar, we could keep it really interactive and do some things with screen shares and some things that were harder to do in the format of the summit. So the way we got here today is when Mike and I were planning my summit presentation, we said, you know what, let's have a second session where we can really get more tactical and share with people a little bit more of the nuts and bolts on how to do some of the things that I was talking about. So today, that's what we're going to do. And we're going to discuss overall some of the hacks that I've discovered, that we've discovered. And hopefully the goal at the end, the outcome I'd want you to have, is to have at least one new strategy or hack or approach when it comes to virtual selling that you didn't have before. So Mike, what do you want to add to that? Our time is, we have a hard stop at the top of the hour. We're going to wrap a little early on that, right?
Yep, sounds good. And you can't unmute yourself, but you can turn your cameras on and wave at us, and then you can raise your hand or type the questions in the chat is probably the best way, and then we can unmute you if we need more information. But I highly recommend you view in side-by-side mode and gallery view up in Zoom. So if you find the upper right-hand corner, which way is that? This way? You can find the view to change your view and participate that way. And I think we got a special offer for you. It's on the screen here. Thanks for sharing, Jody. Sandler.com/remote selling is a whole bunch of assets that we've collected. So there's some great white papers there. There's also an option to get some online courses and other resources, as well as find a local trainer if you don't have one. So we'll remind you of this at the end as well, but Sandler.com/remote selling for more information today. And I'm with you, Jody. We're looking for one thing. So by the end of our hour today, at least one thing that you either want to start doing or stop doing to improve your sales, especially when you're doing virtual or blended selling.
Yeah, and also, as we go through today, first of all, this is all live, and I'm going to do some screen shares, and I'm going to go in and out of screen shares. I'm going to work on a couple of videos here, but I want to let you know up front, because of the live nature and what we're doing here, I might share the wrong screen. I might kind of do something a little off here, but I'm asking for forgiveness up front. I'm going to demonstrate whiteboarding. So there's a few things we're going to do today that are very tactical that I want to demonstrate you, because many times we could talk about a concept until we see it. At least for me, it's like, and then it doesn't come together. So I want to show it to you today, but understand that there's a lot going on. So Mike's going to kind of correct me if he'll say, hey, wrong screen, dude. But I think I'll be okay. Okay, so as I did at the summit, that's the first lesson. Write that down. Let's take a timeout from there. When you're doing your upfront contract with a virtual sales call, I'd highly recommend, especially if you don't do it a lot, ask for forgiveness up front. In Sandler, we like to call it roadblock removal. It's part of an upfront contract, but telling people up front, hey, I'm going to share some things with you today, but understand, just if I share the wrong screen, can you just let me know? I have found that people, when they have in their upfront contract roadblock removal, it can help the call. I'll also say in your roadblock removal that some on this call today may be working from home. So you have a dog or a child or an Amazon delivery that could happen in the middle of an actual meeting. If you think that might happen, like you got a kid at home and they might come in because they need something, tell people up front it can happen. They're way, way more forgiving if you tell them up front that it might happen than if they get surprised by it. So it goes from just happening and being like, that's not professional, to, oh, that's cute. Kid, the dog walked in, right? Or the cat just jumped up. So it's really using the Sandler principle of roadblock removal to our advantage. So like I just did here, start your calls off with that, especially when you're in an environment and you're using some techniques or strategies like today that you're not comfortable with. Just put it out there. Plus the side benefit is you can relax. Because if you screw it up, instead of freaking out, you'd be like, just like I said I would do. And it's not a big deal. Not a big deal.
Yeah, Jody, I wanted to jump in there real quick because we already got our first question about presentation view, which we are not going to be using most of the time today, because one of our other upfront rules that you can take away as a quick tip right here at the beginning is one of the drawbacks of presentations is people feel like they have to give the whole presentation or give it in order. And that's not necessarily the best thing for your sales process. So we will be jumping around in our slides today, as well as jumping in between presentation view and others. But you will notice that all of our slides don't have words small enough that you won't be able to read it, even when Jody's not sharing the presenter view. So this slide, for example, you can still see everything that's on it, even though he can still skip ahead 3 slides if he wants.
Right. And so I could go either way. And so what Mike just said, you can certainly go in presentation mode. Sometimes that makes visually more sense, but because this is our topic today, I intentionally have it in this presentation mode. But you can decide on your audience. You can decide, well, I need it a little slicker, so I want kind of the presentation mode. Or you might say, you know what, I want it to be more authentic and kind of real and not as presentation-y. Is that a word, Mike? But yeah. as Mike just said, right? So you can play with that. But once again, I think where we're at still is that people would rather err on the side of it feeling authentic and maybe less polished than the perfect presentation mode with everything in the right place, but it feels cold and it feels canned and it feels like, okay, I kind of feel like I'm getting the same pitch that everybody gets. So that's just a personal preference. If you're looking at this saying, that's not my deal, whatever one you want to do, that's the beauty of this. It's just one way to do it. But I do think overall, it's about, see, here's the thing with PowerPoint too, is many people make PowerPoint the communication. So PowerPoint is the communication. I believe PowerPoint should aid the communication. It shouldn't be the communication. The PowerPoint should just lead to a discussion on a virtual sales call. It shouldn't be the discussion. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Everyone knows that, but I've seen these decks get so away from what they're meant to do, which is communicate. So let's start with this question I have. Here's a question I have for you. In the chat, virtual selling, it's almost like marketing. It's like the new normal. It's one of these terms. It's like, okay, well, what does that even mean? So I'm curious, just in a word or two, if you were to say, if I would say, what's virtual selling mean to you? There's a pretty wide definition. What would you say yours is? And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer on this.
Meeting without face-to-face. Yeah, anytime you're not in the same room.
Yeah.
Yep.
Remote,
Selling online,
non-face-to-face, Aubrey. Yep. Yep. I'm seeing a lot of same ones.
Zoom calls.
Yeah. Yeah. These are all
I
good.
like including LinkedIn and social selling in my definition as well, because there's a lot of different technologies. It could be not just a virtual meeting, but it could be social selling. It could be a direct message. It could be a TikTok. It could be a lot of different things there.
There's a lot of there's a lot of leeway here. But I really think I've been talking a lot about this the last few months, that as we're opening up, some areas of the country are more open than others as far as getting face to face. Some have been for a while, some are almost there. In Illinois here, we're close and opening by the day. But I really think this idea of the blended salesperson is something I want you to be thinking about for you and what you're bringing to the world as far as selling goes. Because you may know somebody, maybe yourself, where you're way better face to face than virtually. There's a lot of salespeople that say, wow, I got to get face to face because I'm just way better in person. But then there's other people who are like, wow, I'm pretty good at virtual. And for whatever reason, I think I'm actually better virtual than face to face. I kind of don't want to go back in a room. But I think for most of us, and I know that some of you are 100% virtual, or you have to be visiting a facility or something like that. But overall, I really think the future of selling is going to be owned by people who can equally do both. And when they're selling to a prospect who just virtual fits better because they're geographically dispersed, or just they're more likely to do it, that I can easily go to that. But when I got a face-to-face meeting, I can easily go to that. And I think for all of us here, as we say, okay, how can I keep getting better? What's my ongoing growth, my trajectory? I think the blended salesperson is where we should all be thinking, assuming we have a long-term commitment as selling. And I think for you personally, like if as a salesperson, I know if I can do both these, I have a market value greater than most salespeople have. I can kind of determine my future. If I can be really good at both of these, which very few people are, I kind of have my future in my hands, because I don't have a lot of competition if I can do both. So think of being the blended salesperson.
I was going to add to that, Jody, because I think when I teach social selling and some other things, I hear people say, well, I'm not a tech person, or I'm not very good at tech. And I think for me personally, no offense to anybody on the line today, that's okay if you're not right now. But that excuse was valid in the 90s. In 2021, I don't think that's a valid excuse anymore. Yeah. If you didn't do your research to look up what my job title is and what I got going on LinkedIn before you called me, I think that's rude now. I think it's rude to not be able to know how to connect your audio in a Zoom call. And we all have to wait 10 minutes because you didn't know how to use your headphones or something like that. That to me doesn't seem like a valid excuse 18 months into this pandemic anymore. I feel free to agree or disagree in the chat, but that's kind of my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's part of the skill set, and being able to do the things we're talking about today is key here too. So biggest challenge you have, what would you say your biggest challenge is? Let's do 30 seconds on that. I want to see some chats. And then I want to break this down into two ways we're going to define virtual today. And there were so many good ones here. Like we could do another session just on some of the ones I saw here that we're not going to cover. Harder to read people. How do you read the room? I see a bunch of those coming through. What else are you seeing, Mike?
Balancing tech and engagement. Sometimes people lean too much on the technology and they try and get too fancy, and then other times they're not enough. But camera fatigue, trust, always jumping out there. Eye contact, looking at notes and not the screen, or getting too many distractions. All of those very common challenges.
Yeah, and for today, I'll assume that we all kind of have our camera angle figured out. We got some lighting figured out. We know how to turn our cameras on. For today, I'll assume we're all there. If you want some help on that, I'm sure we have some resources on some best practices on that. But yeah, there's some really good ones coming here. Not being authentic, hard to read body. Yeah, so many good ones.
Site tours. I saw there's some stuff that doesn't work very well online, like plant tours or demonstrations and stuff.
Yeah, but so let's ask this question. Let me define two different ways to look at virtual selling for the rest of our call. Synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, so this was kind of the buzzwords, a year ago, and now somebody like, stop using those words. But and I can't spell them. Mike and I were talking yesterday. Every time I do asynchronous, after a year of putting it onto a graphic, it spell checks me. You think I could figure this out, right? So I think it's right.
We teach selling, not spelling.
Yeah. So yeah. So for these two, let's just define these today and break these apart. And I'll give you 3 strategies for each one that are working. They're road tested and they are clearly working. You may be using them. So at the end of the call, you may say that's an improvement, or it might be a new one that I introduced to you today. So if we say synchronous is live and like real time, like we're doing right now, is synchronous. A Zoom call, a sales call, a phone call is synchronous, right? A chat, Mike, is synchronous pretty much as long as there's not a delay.
Yeah.
So here's a question. There's a lot of talk on the challenges, right? In the chat here I'm looking at. But what's an advantage or two you can think of to synchronous meetings? Zoom, Teams, WebEx, whatever your technology of choice is. What's an actual advantage that's actually better than face-to-face, would you say? Think about that. What's better than getting face-to-face? Shane, I see more meetings. Suzette, better time management. Yeah, love that. What else are you seeing here, Mike?
Instant feedback for sure. No distance limits, interaction across groups. Sometimes even in a meeting like this, we're demonstrating it right now. In a live meeting, only one person can talk at a time. In this meeting, we have 30 people talking and participating at the same time.
Yeah, and for those of you selling to groups and committees, this technology enables introverts to come out more than they probably will in the live room. Who's seen this? Thumbs up in the group. Yeah, it's huge, right? So this has been an equalizer with extroverts and introverts when it comes to selling, of getting multiple feedback. And this applies to those on this call when you're selling to groups and committees. You're selling multiple people, 4 or 5 people in a room. Maybe you got a big group that you have to do a presentation for. It's way better. I will also
I saw one of my other favorite ones there, Jody. I saw scroll by was you can have notes up in front of you and you can prepare, or you can get quick access to other documents that, like, if you're in a live meeting, if you didn't bring it with you,
100%.
You're not finding it very easily and not displaying it, right?
Yeah. So think of this one, okay? For those who, many of on this call know Sandler and have been involved in Sandler, some new folks it's newer to, but those who know Sandler, sometimes you want to remember, what are the elements of my upfront contract? What's the pain funnel questions? I sometimes forget those, right? So how cool is it that right around my webcam here, I can have my pain funnel questions, my upfront contract reminder, my different kinds of decision maker questions. So it's kind of cool to be here and then just kind of glance up and remember my next pain funnel question. A little harder to do that in a face-to-face room. I think another advantage is ease of access to meetings that I saw come through. I will also mention another one that applies to some on this call. Getting their technical people and your technical people together earlier in the process to design solutions, better scope out a project. It is clearly easier to coordinate multiple calendars when it comes to a Zoom call. And especially for those on this call who are selling to people that they have 2 or 3 locations, and trying to get them together is damn near impossible in a live environment. So there are so many advantages.
Better work-life balance and no travel time. Better efficiency. I saw those in the chat. Those are great.
No, and I really believe right now, for the person who's willing to adapt, there has never been a better time to be in sales than right at this moment of time. And I'm 30 plus years in it, so I don't want to do the war stories. Well, I remember back when we didn't have cell phones, right? All that kind of nonsense. But I do know that right now, for the right person, it is the best time to ever be in sales. For the wrong person not willing to adapt, it's a really bad time to be in sales. So the fact that you all are investing your hour here says that you're already pretty much past the first test. And now it's just a question of how willing am I to push myself and move out of my zone and try some new stuff. So let me give you 3 synchronous strategies. I'm going to have you write all 3 of these down, and then I'm going to kind of blend all of them together at once, as opposed to going, it'll just work better. The flow will be better. So here's the first one. Just write this down and I'll explain it. The floating deck. Okay. The floating deck, the quick definition is a PowerPoint deck that you've created that has those key graphics that could help engage a prospect or a customer in a conversation, that you have floating off to the side that you're not planning on using the entire deck, but you have access to the information in a pretty quick, easy to access manner. Does that one make sense? So it's kind of floating. And I'll give you an example of that. Another strategy, and I'll elaborate on these, is whiteboarding. Okay? Being able to whiteboard, having the technology and the skill to be able to map out a solution, do some visual thinking, just like you were in a room. Because many of us, going back 2 years, if we were sitting across from someone, we might grab a legal pad and sketch something out. We might grab a napkin, having a cocktail or a cup of coffee, and we sketch something out. We might, in their office, we might jump up and say, hey, can I use your board here, and just sketch a couple ideas out. I mean, that is just the way people process. It's engaging, it's authentic, it's real. Most salespeople aren't whiteboarding now. It's crazy. It's crazy, and it's not hard to get. I'll demonstrate it in a moment. And the last one of the 3 main strategies, and there's more, but I want to keep it simple today, is in and out of screen share. In and out of screen share. So let me break these apart. In fact, we'll do in and out of screen share right now. We'll come out of screen share. So here's the thing that, I mean, there's so many great lessons over the last year. And it has highlighted for me more than ever that with all these technologies and strategies, everything we're talking about, I think, and one of the things I try to do with everyone I'm working with is just try to simplify the world. The world's complex. Who would agree? Every day it's more complex. I was like, how do I make sense of this? And now we're throwing some technologies at you. You're like, God, I was just getting comfortable. Like, really? But when you boil it all down, I think the litmus test is this. Selling is communicating. It's about engaging in a conversation. And everything we're talking about today is really just meant to be better communication. So when we talk about floating deck, whiteboard, in and out of screen share, I'll elaborate, but I want to start with, it's just meant to be communicating. I don't think it's normal, for example, to have some kind of deck up in a sales meeting that's always there. And then we're here and it's there. Why not use the deck in and out of screen share? If I'm talking to someone, we're having a conversation, and then it makes sense to bring a graphic up, I bring it up. And we talk a little bit about it and I take it away. So that's my in and out of screen share. I have found that once people get comfortable with that, it's a way better meeting. It's way more engaging. It's a way to draw them into a conversation and communicate and get them to elaborate on whatever the topic would be that we're doing.
I think it's a great cue to let the participants know that it's their time to talk too. Okay, I'm done presenting. Now I need to hear back from you and transition into the meeting or emphasize something that's really important. I'm gonna take this down and I'm gonna tell it to you like it is, right?
Right, exactly. And being able to, so if I use the litmus test of communicating to what you just said, Mike, it's about us talking. It's not about the deck, right? It's not about the deck. So I have a deck here. I'm going to pull up here. And by the way, also, when you're in the middle of a meeting, and I'll demonstrate, but I'm going to pull.
I wanted to call an audible too, Jody. I know we said we would do this, but this is something you would have in a sales call, right? We had 3 people ask what technology you use for whiteboarding already. And I know there's probably 10% of our audience that are thinking, how do I do the whiteboarding thing? Can we go in reverse order and go to number 2 next?
Yeah, we can go to number 2. Let's do number 2. So, okay, let's say I'm in a meeting and, well, first of all, do we want to just do the technology? You want to get that out of the way? Okay, so there's a number of them. So I'm sure I'm going to miss some, and someone on this call is like, no, I got a better one. And so I'm a shiny object guy, so please don't chat. Well, you can chat it. I'm just not going to look at it because I will be trying a new one. Is anyone else guilty of this? You'll have a new idea. They're like, oh, there I go, it's shiny object. So what I use is something called the XP pen. So I have it right here, XP pen. If you really want the details, I like the Artist 12. But you can use an iPad. You can use, I think Wacom is that the mic. There's a couple brands that they're all good. Yeah. I tried a few, and this one seemed to work for me. But just pick your one and just own it. Just don't do what I tend to do. Is like, oh, I'll get a new one, and then it takes me 6 months to learn that one, and then I learn that, and I go to another one. I'm a mess sometimes with that. So I stick with this one. So if Mike and I were in a meeting, and let's say Mike, let's say it's a Sandler meeting. And I say, Mike, what's your challenge you're having with your sales team? What might you say?
Prospecting. Can't get them to
Prospecting.
prospect.
Yeah, prospecting. And you know, Mike, I have a couple ideas on just matter if I just pull up a whiteboard, I'll walk through a couple things. I want to better understand. I think if we visually
Sure.
capture it, it'll help talk through this. So if you're saying prospecting, okay. So now when you're saying prospecting, would you say, and here's something to think about too, because when people are not prospecting and teams are not prospecting, I find that like for a salesperson, it could be a few things. Part of it's just a frustration for you, probably like, why aren't they prospecting? But really, there's three things to look at. There's attitude, behavior, and technique. And we call this the success triangle in Sandler. But if we look at this and we say, and I'll ask you, is it my people just don't have the mindsets, like they fear rejection, or they're not hungry, or they're in a comfort zone, or what's going on with that? Or is it they're not sure the activities they should do? They haven't really mapped out a behavioral plan, so they don't track it. Or is it the technique? They're not sure how to open a call. They're not sure how to get someone's attention. Where would you say the biggest challenges with your team? So I'm not going to, okay, out of roll, we'll stop there. But my point there is, if I was on a sales call with Mike, I could quickly sketch something out. And then as we're going through it, I would start taking notes. And then I said, you know, so what's a challenge with you with prospecting? And I say, and then I start the pain funnel. Well, tell me more about that. And let's say we fast forward 15, 20 minutes into the conversation, and I figured out that Mike has a $10 million problem, and that he's not sleeping, and he's not sure he has the right people. And think of visually what's happening. Instead of me sitting in a conference room with Mike, and we're at the conference room table and we're just talking, or a phone call where this is just going out into the ether somewhere, I am visually in front of Mike, capturing visually what his problems are. And if we look at visual, auditory, kinesthetic, communication modalities, the general population is clearly highest scoring in visual. Yet most salespeople are not doing a visual part of the call. Here's what they're doing. They're doing this, which one-on-one is a glorified phone call. It's basically a phone call with a camera. And that's okay. It's better than a phone call. But why not take advantage of the science around communication modalities, visual, auditory, kinesthetic? And so whiteboarding is clearly something that I have seen completely change the interaction, the authenticity, the realness. Because Mike says something, I say, hey, let me add something to that. And I do, sometimes I do a different color. I'll say, okay, let's check this out. And you know, in the sake of this call, I'm not going to map it out. But by the end of it, and then I can scroll out and I can say, okay, let's move this over here, Mike. Let's add some more things over here. And I add some things there. In the chat, I want you to chat at the end of a sales call. 90% of the time, we wrap it up. We're wrapping it up. Mike's a prospect. We've had this stuff. All these pains are on the whiteboard. We've talked it through. We've been going in and out of screen share. And at the end of it, pretty much like clockwork, what does everybody ask me as we're ending it? Hey, we're doing an upfront contract. We're having a next step. We're doing all this stuff. But what does everyone ask me at the very end, do you think? Every single time as we're wrapping it up after we whiteboarded. Exactly. Ben, I saw the first one. Ben Hall. Can I get a copy?
Yep.
Every time they ask me that. Now think how cool that is. Going back to a phone call of the same first sales call, possibly, or conversation, or maybe in a room, it kind of just went out into the ether. But how great is that? That the prospect says, you know what, can you basically send me my pains so I can keep reviewing them and keep them top of mind, so I can keep reminding myself why we started talking? I mean, that's what's happening.
I think you just hit on like 3 other great benefits. I mean, one, you can record these Zoom calls versus a live one, and you can go back and check the tape if you have to, or send the recording to somebody who wasn't there. Several people in the chat mentioned you can get them to collaborate on these. So if you use Zoom and the annotation tools, you can actually allow people to draw on there with you and add stuff to the list, or Google's Jamboard and Miro board and some of the others allow you to collaborate on documents like that. Dropbox paper, there's lots of things you can use, so don't get hung up on the tool, but it's amazing how much better that co-created solution is, and that it's documented together and recorded the discussion when you pass that off to implementation, or when legal has to go back and check what you actually promised them, or
Right.
all kinds of things. And a ton of great benefits there.
So one thing you might want to capture, just as we go through so many things and the danger of this hour talking about a lot of things, but just take a moment and just write the word whiteboard down. If you've wrote it down, just make a note. Is that like start, if that's something you want to explore? Or you might be looking at this, yeah, that's not my thing. I got some other things I'm doing, but I want to make sure that when we're going through this, that we're capturing some actions and some potential awarenesses. So let me go back to floating deck. Okay, so Mike, we'll go back to, I think, number one in our order. So let me show you, I wouldn't show a prospect this, but because we're here in the context of what we're doing, let me show you my floating deck. There's 183 slides in my floating deck. And so first of all, once again, I don't go through it. It's not like death by PowerPoint. It's like, oh, here we go, right? That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of it is in the middle of a meeting, I have some go-tos I can pull up. So if I go to share this here, this is my floating deck. This is like mine for my Sandler business when I have a sales call or a first meeting. So you can see there's a lot here. So I don't use all 183. In fact, I've got it down to these 11 at the top that are pretty much 90% of the time, one of them is going to come up. Okay. So first of all, I think the floating deck is a really good tool to use as something to have sitting there. Okay. And so it's off to the side. So let me demonstrate it here again. So if Mike and I are talking and we're in the middle of our meeting and we're just Zoom call to Zoom call, no distractions, no PowerPoint slides, we're having a conversation, and Mike says, hey, Jody, I get this prospecting issue. You know, I'm not sure with my team, what's up with that? We're not bringing new accounts in. So instead of whiteboarding, in fact, if I heard that on a call, I wouldn't have done the whiteboard, I would have done this. Now let me give you the word track, because you don't have to be flawless. You don't have to say, that's a good point, Mike, and you hit some magic button and it pops up. You don't have to do that. That's not what would happen in a meeting. If in a meeting someone said, hey, can you bring, and you say, let me find it. I got it here in a briefcase or something like that, or let me pull it up. So that would have been just the way it worked. So if Mike says something about prospecting, I don't have to make it flawless. I would just say, and I'll go into roll. Hey, Mike, that's a really good point on prospecting. And let me just, I have a graphic here. Let me just share this. I think it'll help us talk through this. So let's see, it's right. Yeah, here we go. So let me share this with you, Mike. And then I always ask, hey, Mike, is that showing up? You seeing that? And Mike says, yeah, it is. So Mike, you know, when you say prospecting, I want you to think about these 4 areas that people are looking at when it comes to like their different, you know, how they're approaching sales. So very common today for someone to say, you know, we need more new business. We need more prospecting. But I want you to think today about this. If that's your strategy, start asking yourself, like, is it the skills? Do we need skills on closing or prospecting, or is it getting around gatekeepers? Or is it, so, like, you know, are we not around gatekeepers? Or is it, you know, word tracks? Maybe it's word tracks we're not doing. We don't know that. Or
I love this, Jody. And what I'm hearing here is a couple of things. One is, I think since the very beginning, David Sandler 50 years ago said, like, you know, you can bring all your supporting materials, just don't show them. Don't give them unless the prospect asks for them, or you have a reason to show them, and you can even ask their permission. I like what you said. Can I show you a quick graphic that would allow us to walk through it? Or if they said, hey, I don't know what the Sandler selling system is. Can you show me what that is really quick? And then you can show that, but most of the time you're not presenting unless there's a reason to present. We're being super efficient with these slides this way.
Well, and if it goes back to my definition, it's meant to engage. It's meant to have a conversation. I know that. So if I was continuing, I say, you know, maybe it's not the skills. Maybe, you know, asking yourself the question, do I have the right people, Mike? And some people are saying, you know, we're not prospecting because we have people in comfort zones. And so out of role, I would spend 6 or 7 minutes typically on this and then start asking questions. Mike, what's the biggest challenge? Staff, tell me more about that. And the pain funnel, tell me more, be more specific, give me an example. I can tell this whole group here that this floating deck, I've run multiple 90-minute meetings on this one slide. Because we're talking about it. And then instead of losing Mike and I bring it back, I said, okay, Mike, can you elaborate on that? Tell me more about that. And then Mike says something else. I'm saying, hey, Mike, let's pull that back up. Let me just add to our graphic here. And then I'll do this and we'll talk about it. I'll leave it up for a couple minutes. We'll talk about it. I'll say, okay, Mike, any other thoughts you're having? And I'll take it away because I want to keep it's communication. It's not about the slide, not about the deck. It's about engagement. And so that's my overall litmus test is it helping the communication? And so many decks, who's seen a deck that it does the opposite? It loses communication. It's like, what just happened here? How did that happen? Okay, so yeah. You've pretty much seen all three, the floating deck. And here's what I would suggest your next step for your floating deck. Don't worry about 180, whatever, right? It's really about my 11. Those 11 are 90% of my slides. I just have some data. Once in a while, someone will say, what are the stats on opening emails? Or what are the stats on people who want virtual versus face-to-face? I know where that's at. It's around slide 70. So I can find that quickly. But usually it's like a slide like I just shared, where it's like, okay, that makes sense. And I've never had anyone say, well, I never even gotten the vibe. Well, that makes no sense. I mean, they love it because it's not the death by PowerPoint they're used to in a sales meeting. It's just communication. And the beauty of this one, and I think we all have something like this, by the end of this conversation, it isn't a sales pitch. They are thinking differently based on me visually helping them walk through their issues. They've gotten clarity at the end of it as to like, what is my issue? Okay, so are we cool with that?
Love it. Yeah,
okay.
Love it. Let's move on. Should we do a wrap up here and see what are the top takeaways, what you're going to do? So we're going to keep collecting these.
Let's do a takeaway on that. Just overall, floating deck, in and out of screen share.
Any questions?
Yeah, so it's great. Okay, what are you thinking of using? Yeah, mix things up. Doug, love that. Yeah, that's part of it, right? All Zoom is camera fatigue. All PowerPoint is PowerPoint fatigue. And a little so I'll do a little whiteboard. And you can see that I blended whiteboard in with my slides. So I think that's a good way to do it too. You just have it right there and then you can send them the notes. Yeah, Karen looks back and forth. Yeah, cool. Yeah, Troy, in and out helps with the fatigue. Yeah, cool. Okay, so let's do part 2 of this. And let me go back to our main deck here. So let's talk, if that's synchronous, that's all live stuff, a sales meeting. Let's talk about asynchronous. So in my, lack of spelling, I got to make it real. So we'll call this, I think the group did, not real time. And for today, even though email's not real time, there's other communications, hell, a fax or a letter, those are asynchronous too. And maybe the fax is coming back, I'm thinking, Mike. I think I got to get my fax skills down.
I like the handwritten notes. I like going direct mail because nobody gets that. Their mailbox is less full than their email box these days.
I don't interrupt. Yep, that's the beauty of a contrarian approach of selling, of mixing it up and not sounding like everyone else. Handwritten, in and out of screen share, everything we're talking about today. I'd be really surprised if they had a sales call ever that had this kind of blend of just authentic communication. They probably haven't experienced it. If we look at pre-recorded video, now I like Vidyard personally, but I know there's things like Loom and there's Wistia and there's a whole bunch of others. So I'll reference Vidyard in here. Understanding, you can use whatever you want. I like Vidyard. I've used a bunch, and for me, it's the easiest one. But you pick your technology. But if I use the word video instead of pre-recorded video today, it's really meant to be interchangeable. Okay. Okay. So first of all, there's 121 emails the average person gets in an average day. 121. So part of our challenge is breaking through. And so part of the challenge is, how do I stand out in 121 emails a day? And not only that, in addition to breaking through, we also have a challenge with communicating, because we know who here, thumbs up, who's here seen it where you sent an email out, it was clear as day to you what you were trying to say and they completely misread it. or actually they read it and you miswrote it. It's like, holy crap. What
Either way, both ways,
right?
both ways happen.
Right. And so some of you have seen this example, but think of this in an email. I didn't say he stole the money. That's a sentence in an email. So I get that from Mike. Now, let's say Mike intended it to be like this. I didn't say he stole the money. That's different than Mike meant it to sound like, I didn't say he stole the money, which is different than saying, I didn't say he stole the money, which is different than saying, I didn't say he stole the money. So think of it. One sentence, I changed the tonality on one word, I changed the entire sentence. You try to do an email that tries to make sense in 3 paragraphs, it's pretty much impossible. So one of the ways I would suggest you break through clutter and communicate more effectively is with pre-recorded video. So if we go here, first of all, Vidyard, this is what a Vidyard would look like. When it shows up in someone's email, it pretty much can have text, but the most important part is your face and the initial few seconds, if you wanted to move, or a snapshot of you holding like, hey, Mike up. I mean, think about that. 121 emails that day, Mike gets one with his name held up with someone pointing to it. It's really hard not to open that. Some people won't go, oh, what if it's a security thing? But people open them. I got a pretty high open rate on mine. Yeah. So just doing that. If you don't have a tablet, you do it old school on a legal pad, doesn't matter. But holding their name up is critical to getting the high open rates. Okay, so it shows up. So if you're unfamiliar with these, it shows up visually interesting. So already you have a fighting chance from the 100 or the 121. Plus with Vidyard, you're not just, as we just discussed, is email is just dealing with this. With a pre-recorded video, I can use the entire communication spectrum. And I can walk someone through an email, through a message. That's pretty much impossible to do effectively in a specific one, a specific email, right? Does that make sense? So I think many of us know the science, that physiology, tonality, words, body language, tonality, spoken words. So if we look at this here, this is the screenshot, just the Vidyard. This is what it looks like. You got 3 options. You can do a camera, which is just like me holding the thing. I can do a screen share walkthrough where I do a kind of a walkthrough of a PowerPoint, or I can do a blend where I start with my face larger and then I kind of go down and then I go walk through a slide. So understand there's a few ways to do it. Just a deck without you there, or the blend of the two. You pick which one makes the best, most effective message. So if I look at this here, let me do a few strategies. I shared these in the summit, but I wanted to elaborate with them because we have a little more time here.
Can I call a quick timeout, Jody, and just hit a couple of common questions? Because I see these every time we do this. People are asking the best length for a video, and then also I saw several other tools. So there are best practices. We've already recorded a webinar with Vidyard themselves, and there's a special offer. If you go to vidyard.link/Sandler, you can get a free trial there as well. Lots of best practices, but can you get a quick tutorial? I think as long as the video is engaging, it doesn't really matter how long it is, right? But we want to keep these fairly short, probably under 5 minutes, maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, and so like, here's the advantage to what we're doing right now is I didn't know Mike was going to ask that question, but while he was talking, I was able to pull something up. Another advantage to getting comfortable with the technology. So I'll share this. This is kind of like this is my secret information, but I'll share it with you anyway. Over the last year, 1,483 people have viewed my stuff. Well, actually 698 different people. I can tell you that 89.4% are watched. And then I know down here that we've got all these kinds of different things here. I've got 62 views of this, 1 minute and 32 seconds, 53 views of that, 2 minutes and 9 seconds. So we've got some kind of cool numbers. I won't get into it here, but you can start knowing where's your sweet spot. Where are people dropping off and where are they not dropping off?
And how many people in the organization have seen that? That's the other huge one about this is if you record a video and send it to one person in a large organization and it's viewed 83 times, that video went a little viral there in that organization. There's more people, more decision makers that you didn't know about that are watching this video.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't the same person watching it 83 times.
No, I won't pull it up here, but I checked in a video I sent out yesterday to a prospect. I sent it to one person and I noticed that 3 people had viewed it. So she saw what I sent and sent it to 2 colleagues. That's another advantage to Vidyard. See, Vidyard or pre-recorded video, write this down. This is key. It took me like a year to figure this out because I'm slow, right? It has a shelf life. A live meeting, think of your live meetings. They're off in the ether. They're gone. Vidyards have a shelf life. They can be distributed. They can be rewatched. They are captured in time. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And when I have someone forwarding a video around, I had one with 34 views that I had sent out a while back. It got passed around and then they decided to move forward based on getting buy-in from a group. Imagine if I tried to run 34 meetings. I'd still be running them. This was like 3 months ago. So think about it because of the shelf life. It's easily passed around if you have the right message and keep it relatively short. Okay, so Mike, I'm going to play one here. You were going to say something else?
No, I was just going to say we can go back to those 3 tips for asynchronous.
Yeah, so let's do this, okay? In our remaining time, I'm going to play a few with you. So the strategies are, and I won't go to the deck that has it. It's a pre-meeting upfront contract or agenda. It's a post-meeting recap. And it's a missing persons, I'll call it. I'll define that in a moment. So here is a sample. So the first one, before a meeting, sending out a Vidyard pre-recorded video of here's what we're going to cover. So I'm not going to play the whole one because it's like 2 minutes here. For the sake of our time here, I'll play the first 30 seconds. You'll kind of get a sense of what I'm doing here. So this is what I would send out to somebody here. Let me make sure I got it formatted right. Okay, Mike, you see in my graphic there?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Let's try this. I think the sound is shared correctly. Looking forward to seeing you in tomorrow's meeting. We're all set for 2 p.m. Central Time. If for any reason you have a problem with that, let me know. But I think we're locked and loaded on that. I got all the confirmations back. And so I wanted to do a quick agenda on this video here, make sure we're on the same page and that we're all prepped on our end for the meeting. I know we have the full hour, but I also know. Okay, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you can imagine what I do is time, purpose, their agenda, our agenda, outcomes. I do some roadblock removal. So if you know the Sandler elements of an upfront contract, I'm basically doing them, but more personally. And what's a side benefit to this, do you think? Because most people in sales might send an upfront contract on the phone, maybe in the Outlook invite, and then the meeting starts and they do it there. But what's a benefit to this being an added little piece to that? Francisco sets the tone. I would agree with that. Yeah, they show up more committed. I love that. Saves time. Yeah, William, I saw it. He said, I assume you do a bulleted agenda. I do. So it's not just this random thing. And now I make them write it down. So that's a really good point. I don't want to make this a lazy exercise because I don't want to write an email either, but I am going to convey it differently. Let me give you a side benefit that might have gone by here. We have so many flying by here. Is if you have multiple decision makers coming to the meeting and you've only met one, you now have done a bit of rapport with everybody. Now you haven't done real rapport back and forth, but think about it. If I have 4 people coming to a meeting, I only know one. And who here's had that meeting, right? Hey, I'm inviting some colleagues to our meeting. Cool. You show up cold and it's like, they're trying to figure out who I am, right? So imagine if at least they watch 60 seconds of me saying, hey, I want to introduce myself. I'll see you tomorrow. It's not full rapport, but at least they know me a little bit. At least they get a sense for my style, a little bit of my tonality, or whatever that would be. So think of that as a side benefit. You start the rapport step in the upfront contract of the pre-recorded video. How cool is that?
I love that, especially when I'm doing public speaking. So events like this and stuff, if I'm speaking to a trade show or association, a big group, always send a video message so that they know that, oh, I'm going to bring some energy. I'm going to be happy and smiling. They know who to expect. And they go, oh, I'll show up and watch that guy. Right. Exactly. And they can already know what to expect in that meeting.
No, that's huge. That's huge. And think about the comfort level. They know you. And if we know the first step in the Sandler process is bonding rapport, we've started the process. Let me give you strategy number 2. As you can imagine, upfront contracts are bookends to meetings and conversations. We begin a meeting with an upfront contract. We end with an upfront contract, even if the upfront contract is close the file, never call me again. But at least we have an upfront contract. We have an agreement. So I'll play once again. I'll just play the beginning of this. I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but I think you'll get a sense of what I would do in a post-meeting recap. Oh, and by the way, let me share with you what it looks like. So you see how my image is moving around on there? That's the way it appears in their email. So you're trying to break through the 121 a day clutter. It's really hard not to, if I'm looking through my emails, to notice something moving around in my email. I'm trying to get mind share so we can engage and I can communicate. I want to lose sight of that. So here we go. Let's do this one. I'll play 30 seconds of this. It was good seeing you yesterday. And this entire group was very participative. So I appreciate all the thinking. I wanted to recap what we talked about, make sure we're all on the same page and establish some of our next steps that we discussed. I think we accomplished what we had set out to accomplish in yesterday's meeting. And the 3 things that clearly that we have, and I've attached the supporting documents with the detail. We have the timeline between now and launch date in the next 2 weeks by day, what our checklist items are going to be and who's responsible for each one. Second document you'll see attached has. Okay, so in the chat, what do you think's happening there? I mean, the obvious is we're recapping the meeting, but what do you think is happening to the communication while we're doing something like that? What do you think that's adding to it that maybe you wouldn't get if you didn't do a pre-recorded video somehow? Curious what you have in the chat here. Yeah, confirm you heard it. Yeah, Karen, I saw that one coming through. Donna, I saw that. It continues to build rapport. I love that. Yeah, there's a level of connection that happens, validating. Oh, I love these.
Shows that you follow up and follow through, right? What other salespeople like just leave the meeting and then you don't hear from them for 2 weeks or whatever until the next call was scheduled? I mean, it's really
that's a great point, Mike. I mean, so much of this once you get used to pre-recorded video like Vidyard, it's really easy to do them. I know if you're new to it, it's like it can feel overwhelming. It's like, wow, I don't know about this. But once you get in the groove, it's like writing an email. In fact, in many ways, it's easier than writing an email. But on the prospect side and customer client side, they way overestimate how hard it was for you to do. And I'm fine with that. Because they're like, wow, Mike went out of his way to do this really cool. They don't have to know how easy it was, right? I'm not going to tell them. But certainly it stands out. I mean, it's really clear. I see people don't drop the ball, John. Hey, good to see you, John. So it's and then you saw me say, hey, supporting documents, make sure you look at this, so it's just whatever you include in there. Okay, last one, write this one down, strategy number 3. So strategy 1 is pre-meeting upfront contract. Strategy number 2 is post-meeting recap. Strategy number 3 is missing persons video. I talked about this one at the summit too, but I want to give you the video and show you the detail. So here's the scenario, and I'm just looking on my camera here. So I'm just picking 4 people randomly. So I have Mike, well, I don't want to mention me. I've got Mike, Suzette, and Jamie here. Okay, so let's say that Mike, Suzette, and Jamie are the 3 people that are coming to the meeting, but let's say that someone named Kristen is supposed to be here and Kristen isn't here today. Let me just pull this up here. So let's say that, and who here's had this happen? You show up at a meeting, 3 of the decision makers or 4 are there, and 1 doesn't show up. And it's the ultimate decision maker. Who's had this? It's like, okay, this is good, right? And then here's what they say. Who's had this one? Mike says, hey, Jody, let's run the meeting. You know what? We'll meet and I'll let Kristen know everything we talked about. Who's had that one? It's a cluster, right? There's no way Mike can convey what we did. So at the beginning of the meeting, I show up. Hey, Mike, Suzette, Jamie, and Mike says, hey, Kristen got called to a meeting, Jody. So we'll take notes. We'll let Kristen know what happens. Cool. And what I'll even do, Mike, is I will at the end of our meeting, I'll do a quick recap for Kristen. So at the end of the meeting, I then say that, hey, good seeing you. Any questions? Great. Hey, what I'm going to do is a wrap up. I'm going to do a recap video. I'll also get a follow-up email. I'll also cut a message and do a recap for Kristen so you don't have to worry about debriefing with her. I'll give her the recap. Okay, out of role. Think how great that is. I control the message. I'm not relying on Mike to be my salesperson. I can do it. I want a direct link because it will be the game of telephone. I guarantee you he's going to lose something in translation to Kristen. So last one I'll play for you. And this one is actually a sample. So you'll see me in the middle of it say timeout. So I wouldn't do that in the actual video. I did that as an example of what you can do so that you can see it. So let me play this one. And this is the last one I'll play. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to start it from the very beginning right here. Okay, here we go. Hey, Kristen, I wanted to update you on what we covered in yesterday's meeting. I know that you weren't able to make the meeting yesterday. The group told me you had a last minute emergency fire to put out. So I thought it made sense to recap things here in this video to you. So the two things that we talked about yesterday were, okay, that's out of role right there, right? Out of role. That's where you fill in the blank with the content of the meeting, and you include the content that Kristen missed. And then you can embed certain pains or issues that you want to introduce into Kristen's thinking that will lead her into a different thought process. So back into role, here's how I would end it. So I think that covers it, Kristen. If you do want to talk one-on-one to talk through some of these things, especially in relation to your department, or if I glossed over anything in relation to the meeting we had yesterday with the team, let me know. Happy to have a conversation. Otherwise, I know we're scheduled as a group to meet. Okay, so we get the sense of that too. So I have had huge success with this one. Being able to have a direct link to the missing decision maker. If you do nothing else, start doing that, because everyone in this call probably has had someone key miss a meeting and you're like, now I'm relying on them. I already know this is not going to go well. Okay, I want to respect everyone's time. Should we do a chat on the pre-recorded mic? See what a takeaway there is?
Yeah. Any final questions on pre-record, asynchronous communications?
Yeah, and if you could put
any
in the
last
chat
questions here?
a lesson too. You know, what's something you can try to do, or you can incorporate. If you had to pick one, pre-meeting upfront contract, post-meeting recap, missing decision maker. There's a few others. A lot of
people asked about deliverability. I know it's not as big an issue, but there are some security issues with banks or healthcare or something. Have you noticed any deliverable issues with using Vidyard or any other links in there?
Yeah, I've had some, and it's a legitimate concern. But I've had people say, you know, if I send 100 emails out and I send 100 Vidyards out, even though Vidyards will get screened and I'll lose 30% of them because of some junk thing, the 70% that get through, I get a pretty high open rate. So I'll play that. I'll play those numbers.
Good.
But it's not perfect. It will get scanned. Yep.
Yeah.
So awesome. Some good ones. What are you seeing, Mike?
Can you run down the steps of the missing decision maker video again one more time?
Thanks, so the steps. Well, it would be, first of all, I'd set the upfront contract in the meeting to the group. Hey, group, one other thing I'm going to do, I'll send Kristen a quick video recapping this so you don't have to worry about conveying all that stuff. So when you all get together, she'll be up to speed. And then I would basically do, hey, Kristen, sorry you missed the meeting. I know you had something, but I want to do a recap here. And then I do the recap.
Great question from Alex. At what point in the relationship is Vidyard best used? Beginning and end are the stats from Vidyard. So prospecting is great. Introducing yourself, building bonding and rapport early, and then late, like Jody's doing here with decision makers and other things, demonstrations or key follow-ups.
And I think Mike, that initially for me, Vidyard was kind of like, wow, it's a cool way to prospect, creative stuff. Like if some of you've seen these really cool ones, like, wow, that's amazing. But I think the equal or greater value is just what we're talking about here. When you get into the sales process, being way better at communicating. Sure, that opening is important, but I think for most people I work with, it's equally or more important throughout the sales process. And then when they're a customer or client, better communicating along the way. I mean, it's just better communication. It's that simple.
I'd also add one more thing here before we wrap up for everybody on this one, which is you have all these recorded and saved then. So if one of them works and you close a sale, send that to the rest of your team. If you're a sales manager, record a Vidyard for your upcoming sales meeting on Friday and tell them this is what we're going to cover and what I expect you to do, or have them record their 30-second commercial and send it to you. It's much better even outside of regular sales communications as well. There's a ton of great lessons there. And Jody, will you throw up the thank you slide one more time? We have About 60 seconds left if you have any final questions, but we did have some special offers for you today. So if you like what you heard, we have previous recordings of other sessions available in Sandler Online. If you go to sandler.com/remote selling, we were recording today. We'll share this recording with everybody who registered, and it will be on demand for anybody that missed it as well at your location at sandler.com under the resources tab. But all that's recorded. We'll share those out. We don't typically share the slides, but we'll share the recordings, and you can screenshot as much as you want. Jody, will you say that pen and whiteboard you use one more time?
Yeah, I use the XP pen. So XP. Well, hold on. Now that would be weird to not share a whiteboard, right? So let's do this. Let's do this right. XP pen. I like the Artist
Thanks,
12. Is that showing up there, Mike? Is that working?
Yeah.
So XP pen Artist 12. I mean, I like, this is not an endorsement. It's just what I like, and I've gone through a couple, so I like this one. But just don't get the Artist P Professional. It gets a little trickier. So try that. I like that one.
All right, awesome. Thanks for attending, guys. We're going to stop right on time, so I'll stop the recording. Have a great week. Good luck and good selling. If you need any help, reach out to your local Sandler trainer. Have a great day. And Joseph wins the award for cutest coworker there, Joseph. I saw that. Thank you for that. That brought a smile to my day.
What was it? What was it,
Had
Joseph?
his daughter up there with him.
Okay, cool. Co-pilot.
Getting sales training at a young age, always a good thing.
Yeah, you should delegate cold calling to her.